up there on the screen. I didn't realize, I look across the hall and I see they've got a fancy PowerPoint template that I was supposed to use. Oops. So I'll be the one who doesn't use the template. That's my Twitter handle right there, and I tweet unnecessarily. Sometimes even about education stuff. You're welcome to follow me. Let's see if I can get this remote to work. They changed the remote for Keynote with the last iOS update. I figured that out this morning. So here we go. I just made it a tab. There we go. So I'm the Director of Technology at Mercersburg Academy. Mercersburg Academy is a private boarding school in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. I'm also a father and husband. I'm going to say a whole bunch of things today about our experience with iPads in Mercersburg, and hopefully you will find lots of good information to take back to your schools. And if you have any questions, shout them out while I'm talking. Hit me up on Twitter. Find me afterwards. I'll be happy to answer. I'm also a volunteer firefighter and EMT because putting out fires as an IT director is not nearly enough of a challenge. I like to then go do it after I'm done. At Mercersburg, as with all good independent schools, you don't get to just do one thing. I'm also a math teacher. I teach Algebra 2 this year. At Mercersburg, I've taught either Algebra 2 or pre-calculus. At other places in former lives, I've taught everything in the math curriculum from pre-algebra up through AP calculus. I also occasionally do an independent study with AP computer science, something I'm not entirely thrilled about. I'm not a big fan of the AP computer science syllabus. But I also coach JV basketball because, again, there's not enough things going on that I like to, after the day's over, go hang out with 9th and 10th graders and get hit in the face with basketballs, which happened the other day. Mercersburg Academy, that's our chapel, that's our logo. The communications director makes me put that somewhere in every presentation we do. Mercersburg Academy has 435 students. We are your stereotypical East Coast boarding school. So tuition's way too high. Nobody on earth should be able to afford it. Nobody on earth should be required to pay that much money. And yet somehow we have students show up every single year. We have problems different than other folks at other institutions, but I've been where you're at. I taught at a public school in Kalamazoo, Michigan for a few years, and I taught at a really, really poor independent school in northern Michigan, the kind of school that every year would send out notes that if they did get so many donations, they weren't going to open the next year. So I've been on both sides of that spectrum. I'm lucky right now to be at Mercersburg, a place where our problems don't typically revolve around money. That's not to say that we don't still have lots of problems, but they typically don't involve money. In the fall of 2012, Mercersburg decided that we wanted to be an iPad school. Actually, we made the decision long before that. But in the fall of 2012, we said to our families, you will send your student to Mercersburg with an iPad. So they showed up in 2012, and every one of them had an iPad, and every one of them brought them to class. And this presentation is about all the things that happen next. It seemed like a really good idea, and in fact it was. There are only a few gotchas with iPads, but they're big gotchas. First of all, why we decided to do it. And I want to make sure that I'm clear on this because I was surprised yesterday in one of the pre-conference sessions I was in that there were a number of people in the room that were actually at schools that were not using iPads. They were using Chromebooks, they were using netbooks, they were using some other one-to-one device. And it surprised me that they were at this conference because I thought, I guess I expect everybody at the conference to be iPad folks. But let me make sure that I'm real clear on why Mercersburg is with an iPad now. When we made this decision, which was about a year and a half or 2 years before we actually rolled them out, there was no other device. In fact, there wasn't even an iPad when we made the decision. When we made the decision, the original device we were going to go one-to-one with was an iPod Touch. And the reason that we made that decision was because a curriculum committee came to me and said, we really feel like we're behind the ball. We feel like we should be forcing our students to do some 21st century thing, and we think that means that they have to all have the same device in class. And so what device do you want to use? And at the time, I said, well, the device I really want to use is an iPod Touch. And the teacher said, well, that's crazy. You can't do anything on an iPod Touch. And I said, well, no, it's just the opposite. You can do everything on an iPod Touch, and you can put it in your pocket. And because it will allow them to download video games and music and movies and all the things they really like, they'll never forget it, and it will always be charged. And the teachers and the academic dean at the time, a great big Costa Rican man who was a former professional boxer, said in this great accent that he has, "I'm not so sure about the pedagogical advantages of having video games in the classroom." Fair point. But if you give them all a laptop, Gene, they're going to forget to charge it, they're going to hide behind the screen, and it's going to be a bigger problem in the classroom than it is going to solve anything. And you can't carry a textbook on a laptop. Because remember, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, up until Apple put the iBooks app on the laptop, there was no good reader for textbooks on a laptop. So the iPod Touch it was. That's what we decided on. And exactly 1 week later, Apple announced the iPad. So I quickly reconvened the committee and said, okay, well, this makes even more sense. This is what we'll do. That's why we landed on the iPad. The Chromebook didn't exist. The only thing close to the Chromebook was that awful netbook thing that you paid $200 for and it almost fit your pocket and did nothing very well at all. So that's why we landed on the iPad. It's important that you think about it now and reevaluate that question. Let me ask it this way. How many people in the room are already at an iPad school? Okay, how many people are still trying to decide if they're going to go to an iPad? Okay, it's only for 3 of you then, but you're going to get this question. Why not a Chromebook? Why an iPad? You're going to have people that will make the argument that the only reason you're going to an iPad is because everybody does an iPad. And that once you get into bed with Apple, you can never get out. Fair enough. Because getting into bed with Google is going to be any better than getting in bed with Apple. Right? Absolutely, I agree. If the Chromebook existed, we would have looked at it, but it didn't exist. So we didn't have to make that decision, but you're going to have to. So you're going to have to find a way to say the iPad over the Chromebook. For me, it still comes down to one very simple premise. The App Store versus whatever that thing is that Google does, Google Play. First of all, they named it Google Play versus App Store. Okay, so I think the implication is clear. I'm still not convinced that Google has the apps. When you want an app in education and you go to the App Store, you get 5 options for everything you want. When I look in the Android market or the Google Play Store, I get 1, 2, maybe 3, and at least half of those are bad. Okay? So there is still a significant difference in app development, and that's really important. Okay? The next thing is, would we do it again? Unequivocally, absolutely yes. No question. If for no other reason than this, my daughter's a senior at Mercersburg right now, and my textbook costs have been slashed across the board. We used to pay, when my son was there and in my daughter's first year as a freshman, we used to pay upwards of $600, $800 a year on textbooks. This year, I spent $47 because her German instructor insists on a very particular workbook that has to be ordered from Germany. As an institution, we decided that we would create many of our own textbooks, and it has turned out fabulous. 1, it's not very difficult. And 2, you get exactly what you want as a teacher in the classroom. So that Algebra 2 book, which had 14 chapters, and I would skip 6 of them, and within a chapter I would skip that section, and I would have to add to this thing, it's gone. Just do it yourself. It's not nearly as hard as it sounds. And with all the free resources that are out there already, Khan Academy, for instance, I don't know why we're continuing to go back to the well of $80, $90 textbooks. If I were back in Kalamazoo Public Schools, I would sit down with our math curriculum director and I would say, this is crazy. Look at how much money the district is spending on that. Give me part of that money. Let me sit in a room with 3 teachers for 2 weeks over the summer, and we'll come back with a better book than the one we're paying for now. And they can carry it around. So there's no question, we would absolutely do this again. But here's what we really learned, and this is probably the slide we'll spend the most time on. If you haven't already done this, your wireless isn't enough. If you have done this, you quickly figured out that your wireless wasn't enough. It's not your internet connection. This is really important. It's not your internet connection. It's your wireless. And we saw it in this very room in the last session, didn't we? It was painful. And this is the one thing that Apple has gotten wrong. And Apple's gotten this wrong for a lot of years, so this is not new information. Your IT folks, if they've been around long enough, will know this. But Apple is terrible with wireless connections. They were terrible with Ethernet connections 20 years ago. The iPad, every time it connects, the very first thing it does when it turns on is all of the things that are in the background say, ooh, 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 an internet connection. Can I get some new stuff for you? So every single time kids walk into a room and they open it up, they turn it on, the thing goes crazy. And it kills wireless connectivity. The second problem is then, when your iPad loses its connection, for whatever reason, you turn it off, you put it to sleep, you walk away. The next time it comes on, it wants to reconnect to exactly the same access point that it was last connected to. And that's something that your IT folks are going to have to go do a little digging in. There's ways to fix that, but they're going to have to look at this. If your IT guys sit down and do a packet capture, when the iPad reconnects, it will actually look for the hardware address of the last AP it was connected to. The problem is it will usually find it, even if it's a building away, and there's no possible chance it can connect. So what happens is it's looking for it, it can't find it, and it's sending off all these packets across the network that aren't ever going to get anywhere. And that causes network congestion. So your IT guys have got to be really good about going into the background and shortening the time to live so that when your iPads aren't seen by an access point for a couple of minutes, that the access point, the controller that's in the background actually says, no more. Do not try to connect to me again. Okay? So we use Aruba, which I love, a technology product named Aruba. The guy who started the company actually says, I named it Aruba because I wanted people to think of something nice every time they thought of our product. Cisco has the same capability. You have to go in and tell it specifically not to allow these connections to be formed. Okay? And this is a money problem, by the way. Yeah, go ahead.
So then, what is the timeout framework? So if you've got to, say, use the same room twice a day?
I think our timeout, our time to live is like 2 minutes.
Okay, but then presumably half an hour later I need to use the same room and I can connect again.
Yes, absolutely. Because what it does is the controller itself is now telling the iPad, do not look for the last one, look for the strongest one. So it's actually that two-way communication when the iPad says, I want to connect to this one, because the time to live is already gone, the controller itself says, no, you will take this one. And then the iPad will say, okay. But coverage is a bigger part of this problem, and coverage is a money issue. So on the front end, if you haven't rolled this out, you really have to go at this aggressively with whoever your stakeholders are. You're going to need more money, because you're going to have to add access points. And you may have to add the backbone infrastructure behind the access points. So the old wiring in the building may not be enough, and that's a really hard sell. We do construction every year at Mercersburg. I feel like a large part of my job is really just going through drawings and talking to architects. And this is the single hardest thing for me to convince architects and board members. Well, but you'll do everything wirelessly. Yes, I will do everything wirelessly, but my wireless access points connect to a wire. And that's a really hard thing to get people beyond. Okay? So you may have to have some really hard conversations, especially as you do new construction. When you renovate buildings, the very first thing that will be cut is all of the wiring, because they will say to you, oh no, we'll do everything wirelessly. Agreed, but we've got to get back to that, okay? So you'll have to help your IT folks fight for this. Fiber still has to be run everywhere. Cat 6 cable still needs to be run everywhere. Insurance is an interesting one. We required all of our families to purchase their own iPads and bring them. Our head of school's philosophy was that if you tell people far enough in advance, so as soon as they're admitted, that this is an expectation, then they'll find a way to come up with $300 or $400 they need for an iPad. Birthday gift money, Christmas gift money, rich uncle money, whatever. They'll find a way to do it. And he's right. I really believe that as a country, we've become the consumer society, and if you give people enough warning, and the fact that there are so many of these now available, refurbished, used, older models, that you can now get an iPad for $200. Now we have plenty of students that are on financial aid, and we certainly said to families, if you really can't make this happen, call us, we'll make it happen. Out of 435 students, we typically have 2 or 3 a year that actually come to us with that. But insurance is always the next question. What's it going to cost when it breaks? What are we going to do? So because we did a pilot program for the better part of 2 years, we had some pretty good numbers on what the breakage rate was, and we didn't come anywhere near the insurance premiums. I mean, it's not even close. So what we would have paid for 1 or 2 months insurance premiums is what we were spending on repairs for the entire year. So it doesn't make sense. And again, if you think about a device that's going to cost a parent somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 to $500, and then you look at the cost of the insurance for a year long, I cannot look at a parent and say, yes, insurance makes sense. It makes people feel better, but that's what insurance is there for. Insurance companies make money. So it did not make sense for us, but we don't own the iPads. Okay? And again, your CFO may feel like, well, this will make us feel better. We know we'll be able to just deal with it. We won't have any outgoing expenses. That's fine, but your CFO should also be able to run the numbers. The numbers don't match. But you will get this question. If you do get this question, later on there's an insurance company that I do really like, if you have to do it, because they actually have a program that families can register every device they own under one policy. And I'm going to think of the name before I get to the slide, but eventually I'll get to it. Teacher readiness and training fall under the same category. For those of you who have already done this, you know this is just like everything else. The teachers who fight you will fight you. The teachers who are ready will be ahead of you. And then there will be that whole gaggle in the middle, right? Just sort of waiting. It's the age-old thing. Change is hard. Nobody likes change. It's against our nature to change. And we certainly don't like change when somebody tells us we have to change. The iPad's not going to make any of that different. So the grumpy teacher in the room will still be the grumpy teacher in the room. And the overeager one who brings you new problems every single day will still be the new problem teacher. None of that's going to change. So when those conversations come up, you need to have the same old conversations you've always had. What do we do now? What did we do when the state gave us a new set of requirements? What did we do when the board gave us a new set of requirements? What did we do when we had Grant Wiggins come in and tell us all about this thing? And what did we do when Alfie Cohn told us that homework was terrible and the end of the world? And we do what we always do. We get into a room and we have the same old arguments. That's not going to change with an iPad program. Projectors. This is a good one. So how many of you have projectors in your classrooms right now? And how many of those projectors have an HDMI port? There's my people started chuckling. Yeah, okay. So here's the problem. The problem is that the iPad comes with that one port. And the iPad is great because it's portable and we can do whatever we want with it. But then we wanted to hook it to a projector. And all of those cool wireless connectivity things that came with projectors don't work with an iPad. Panasonic and Epson both make a projector that claim to have wireless connectivity with an iPad. And it absolutely works. 100% of the time, as long as you always want to be in the Panasonic or the Epson app. which means all of the things you really want to do, you can't do. Because those two apps allow you to do pictures, and they allow you to do documents like PDFs, and they allow you to do a really bad web browser. And if you try to do video within the web browser, it won't work because it only sends it out at about 10 frames per second. So that's not going to work. So don't go buy a bunch of Panasonic or Epson printers that say they're iPad compatible, because they're not. So the only other option for wireless is Apple TVs. And Apple TVs work great in your house. They work spectacular in your classroom as long as nobody else on your network has them. And then, as you look up more and more, because Apple never intended for us to use these in schools, you get this ridiculously long list of Apple TVs. And then on Monday morning, yours just doesn't appear on the list anymore, and you call the IT office, and they say, well, just restart the Apple TV. And you restart the Apple TV, and then magically it comes back. But then 2 periods later, it's gone again, and you're back doing the same thing. I'm here to tell you there's no fix for that. Despite all the products that are out there, there's no fix for that. The Apple TV is still the single best wireless way to connect, and it's not any good. I use my Apple TV every single day in my classroom. And it works for me every single day. I never have a problem. There's a teacher that teaches in that classroom the period before me and the period after me, same guy. He has trouble with it every single day. I have no way of explaining that. We've done everything. We've replaced the Apple TV, we've replaced the cables, we've done packet captures with it. We've sat in the room and watched him work. There's something about his electromagnetic field that when he walks into the room, the Apple TV goes, yeah, oh, Carrie's here. No, I'm done. And then I walk in the room and I select it from the list and I click mirroring, a little 4-digit code comes in, I type in the 4-digit code, we're off and running. I never have a problem. I don't know how to explain that. But we can go around our campus, and that's absolutely, there are people who have that field, and when they walk in, stuff breaks. And the Apple TV is just extra susceptible to that. So I don't, that's projection. The only alternative to that is carrying around all these different sized dongles, right? And connecting your iPad. So one of the accessories that you need to make sure that you have is this converter. So it converts from the old to the new. That way you can still use all of the old ones. You don't have to go out and buy the new ones. And the reason I asked about HDMI is because if your projectors have an HDMI port, then you're in way better shape because the resolution is going to be great. The problem with your VGA projectors is that then you're going to fight the resolution issue too, because you've got the old VGA-only projector. Projectors, the Canon that we like to buy has now dropped in price to about $600, and that comes with HDMI. Projection is an issue. There's no great solution.
We have great success with Air Server.
Okay.
We've been using that.
Air Server is the one that you.
Computer.
Yeah. So Air Parrot, Air Server, Reflector, right? If everybody's got one of these, a laptop, preferably MacBook Pro.
It doesn't have to be a laptop.
No, and it works for PC.
That's true. So one of the schools, the Hill School in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, they went through every classroom and they installed a Mac Mini and then put Air Server on the Mac Mini. So the Mac Mini sits up in the corner of the room and is wired directly to the projector. And so when you come in with your iPad connects to the Mac Mini, and then the Mac Mini is what actually projects. That's not a bad solution, but again, you're buying a Mac Mini for every single classroom, which is $500, $600, something like that, depending on what you load it up with. So that saved the life of their projectors, and that was their rationale. They could hold on to all of their older projectors with the VGA-only input. And then they didn't buy Apple TVs, so they went that route. But Air Server does work very, very well. If you have any device to hook to a projector, Air Server, Air Parrot, Reflector, they all work.
The only problem is they all have to be on the same Well, with air server, you have to be on the same network.
Yes.
So we've got
If you're
different
wireless.
layers of networks, different wireless. So we've got gas, and then we've got our division network, and that's it, like next thing.
Right.
But you can, with air server, you can project multiple iPads at the same time.
Yes.
As well as record, so.
Yes. So those functionality, the ability to share other screens, the ability to show multiple screens at once, you're going to have to go that route. You're going to have to introduce another app. With the Apple TV, our students are on one virtual network and our faculty are on another virtual network. And initially, we couldn't get the two to see each other. But through the wizardry of the router, our systems admin just routed the Bonjour traffic from one network to the other. So one of the things that you can do, it is possible to route Bonjour traffic. Despite what Apple tells you about how it's a non-routable protocol, it is routable. It's just blocked on everything by default. So if you have multiple networks, if your students are on one network and you're on another, then you do run into some of these things, but these are all solvable issues. And that's probably an important thing too. You, as an IT guy, remember that's my full-time title, Director of IT Stuff. I'm telling you that when your IT folks say to you, no, we can't do that, you don't want to do it. You don't like doing it, but it can be done. But the Apple TV is an interesting monster in its own right. The other problem with the Apple TV, of course, is every time you turn it on before you connect it, it shows all of the movies, right? So right away your kid's like, oh, let's watch that! You can go under parental controls and turn all that off. But it's there.
We have, at our school, our teachers use Reflector, and they
Yep.
talk a lot about having a lot of problems.
It's exactly the same problem as the Apple TV because it uses exactly the same protocol.
So it's something like air server be.
Air server actually works a bit better because it's a more robust client that uses a slightly different protocol.
And everyone can see that.
Yes.
But everyone's on the network at once, so just,
What's that?
well, we put quite a slow network rather than.
Okay.
If everyone's on the network, if there's someone watching a movie somewhere else, then you can forget about real time projection.
Okay. So air server suffers when the network degrades.
Yeah.
And there again, but that's another part of it. So that's sort of the snowball effect of the iPad in general. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that the beauty of the iPad is that it's always connected. The problem with the iPad is that it's always connected. So when you say, I always tell people that if you've never had a one-to-one program at your school, and you say we're going to go to a one-to-one program, what you really went to is about a 3-to-1 program, right? Because as soon as you introduce the iPad, everybody reaches in their pocket and goes, well, my iPad, you know, I still get my phone, and they put their phone away, and they still have this. I have a student in my Algebra 2 class that refuses to use his iPad out of general principle. So he brings his MacBook Pro and his iPad. And he sits with his MacBook Pro open all the time, and then occasionally he'll use his iPad as his calculator. And then every once in a while he'll pull his phone out because he's graphed something over here, but then he wants to multiply something over here. Right? So he literally has 3 devices. That's more common than not. With once you go to a one-to-one program, it's this permission that you've given everybody, so the drag on your network is substantial. Yeah, that last bullet point, I assume you've all dealt with that.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Apple TV one more time. We have one prototype at our school. But I heard you about 9 months ago. You have, within your Watson's classroom, there is the risk of interference and so forth.
So the problem with one Apple TV in every classroom, there are a couple of things that happen. One, there's no way to sort the list. There's no way to cull the list. If they're on the same network, every single Apple TV appears in alphabetical, numerical order. So all of our Apple TVs are named by the building and the classroom. I happen to teach in Irvine 416. So I have to scroll through all the Bergen Center ones, and then I have to scroll through all the Irvine 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor ones until I get to Irvine 416, and then I select that one. And if you haven't taken the time to set up some of the security settings, by default, when you turn on an Apple TV, as soon as you scroll to it, select it, you get it. So if I accidentally select Irvine 412, then I'm now projecting in 412. Unless we went ahead and set up that 4-digit code so that it prompts on the screen with the 4-digit code and then I type the 4-digit code. Unless there's a student in the room who's also sitting there going, he steals it. So there's that problem, and you know how teachers are, and I am one, so I include myself in this group. But sometimes it's those little things. Oh, that's too. I don't want to scroll through that long list. That's awful. We've got to get that list in. I have teachers that refuse to use the Apple TV because it takes too long to scroll through the list. They teach in a B building. Like, please, I'm in an I building. You're in a B building. You don't even know what scrolling is. Come over here. Be in an L building, please. No question. That's one problem. The other problem is that they have this random disappearing act. And every school that's got a lot of Apple TVs, there's people in the room that are nodding behind you. In every school, this is a hot topic among IT people. How do we fix this? How do we fix this? How do we fix this? We don't. This is an Apple bonjour designed for home use problem. That when you put it on an enterprise level network, it's sending out all these packets telling them that it's aware, I'm here, and for some reason, those packets from time to time just get lost. The Apple TV decides not to send them out anymore. For whatever reason, it disappears off the list. The only fix is to take the Apple TV and restart it, which is not terribly difficult and not terribly time-consuming, except that it will always happen when your teacher walks in the room and has something really important to do right now, and we're running behind schedule, and I got to do it, and oh, by the way, it doesn't work. And now by the time I get to restart, I've lost the kids. I don't know how middle school teachers could ever use Apple TVs, because there's no way any grade boy is going to sit and wait for that. So it's going to be a completely lost session. So what we've said to our teachers is, Apple TV first. If it doesn't work immediately, you have two choices. Plug in, or take the time to go through a restart. And by time, I mean a minute and a half. It's just not a long process, but a minute and a half with antsy kids in the room feels like an hour.
When you say plug in, you mean into the projector?
Yeah, I mean, grab your little dongle, which we gave everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we wired them over to a spot in every room, in the wall. So it's not, it's fairly convenient for them. It's not awful to have to plug in, but again, it's one more thing. And it takes away the ability to walk around the room. It also takes away the ability to share the projector easily. The beauty of the Apple TV is that anybody in the room could scroll through the list, select it, okay, show me what you've got, show me, and then on they go. So, yeah.
Another problem that we have, and I don't know if it's the iPad or if it's the Apple TV, that all of a sudden it just stops mirroring. Now.
That's the Apple TV, yep. Absolutely.
And again, it's one of these tougher.
Yep, it falls into the category of not ready for what we want to use it for. And Apple support is really great in that when you call them and you explain all this, they'll go, yeah. We agree. Yeah. You know, if you put it on its own independent little network, if you made all of your classrooms independent sub-networks, it would work great. But then everything else would fail, right? You wouldn't have internet access, you wouldn't have... So the overhead to try to get it to work in any one room consistently, it would be mind-numbing. It's not worth the investment. That's where something like Air Server may be better for you, but again, I think you'll just trade one set of problems for another. And there's the additional cost of having that other device. If you already have the other device, then you're fine. But if you don't, you've got to figure out a way to manage that. So, we have a lot of teachers that love to use applications like Reflector because it shows the whole iPad screen. So the nice thing about Reflector is that it puts your iPad screen on the laptop and then projects that. So when you do things like clicking the button, the home button, they actually see that on the screen. They actually see the button get clicked. So we have a lot of teachers that prefer that method.
So are you saying that your teachers have issued an iPad, that's it?
No, they're issued a MacBook Pro and an iPad.
So you said they had two choices, they could plug in or,
Apple TV.
oh, they're just.
Restart. Yeah, restart. If they want to wait for a restart. Yep.
We have those LO document cameras, and if you've got the anti-glare sheet, you can put that on top
Yes.
of your iPad, put that under your document camera, and project it just fine that way.
Yes.
With the younger grades, that works sometimes better because then you actually see your finger motions and your touches. And
That, we use that for the TI 83, 84, whatever the thing is now, calculators as well. So if you, although I actually use my iPad as the document camera, and then I put the calculator underneath that, and so the kids can see my finger strokes as I do the calculator. But yes, that's the other thing you can do. If you have a document camera already, and for many schools, we had document cameras in them, and they didn't really like them, so we put them in the basement. You can go get the document camera back out of the basement and use it as the way to project the iPad as well. But projection is, I guess that's really the point, is we learned that projection is an issue. And if you haven't thought about it, it's going to take, do you have a VCR or DVD player already hooked up to your projector? That's one input taken up. Now you want to go hook up an Apple TV, you're going to need another port to plug into, and many projectors don't have them. If you don't have an HDMI port, there's a device out there called a Kinex. It's K-A-N-E-X. And Kinex, for about 30 bucks, it's maybe 20 now, converts HDMI to VGA with an audio port. And that's huge. So you plug that into the back of your Apple TV, and then you can have regular VGA and audio through that little 1/8" headphone jack thing come out. So for many schools, the bigger issue with their projectors is not that they don't have an open port, it's that the only thing that can go into an Apple TV is HDMI. So the Kinex is the one solution that works. I will warn you, there are lots of devices out there that say they will convert from HDMI to VGA. Kinex actually converts. We probably purchased 10 different ones that didn't work. So Kinex, and I'll have a slide that'll show that too. Who pays for what? If you haven't had this discussion at your school, you need to have it. Again, we live in a consumer era. I think most places, independent places, private schools could certainly say to their families, it's what we expect. Public schools, it's a challenge. I understand that. That's something your board is going to have to really work hard on. I happen to live in a really poor school district right now. Mercersburg is a great little town, but it's an agricultural community in the middle of nowhere. The school district is dead broke. They, for a couple of years, actually managed to convince families that they were going to do MacBooks. And then they've now switched to Lenovo, and they'll probably switch again because they have to always go with whatever the cheapest thing on the market is. And I keep wondering when they'll land on iPad because it's just cheaper than anything else they've been looking at. But the school district buys them and then hands them out. I won't get on my soapbox about the fact that the iPad is only useful at the high school level when it's unlocked. Locking down an iPad, I do not understand. You're fighting a problem that you're never going to win. I do understand it at the lower levels, the elementary levels and middle school. I get that. But at the upper level in the high school, you're fighting a problem you're never, ever going to win. The LA school district, you guys have heard this story, right? Released them all, locked them all down, and within a couple hours they were all jailbroken. And so now they've got a new problem. What do you do when somebody breaks a device that you issued to them? And by breaks, I mean software break. Where does that land them in the discipline process? So you may introduce more things than you're ready to go. Apps. Boy, here's a rabbit hole. What do you require? How much are you going to spend? Who's going to pay for them? What about the teacher that finds a new app that does something way better than the app that you already required, but your family's already spent $2 on the old app, and now you want them to spend $3 on the new, better app? Who makes that decision? So for us, we sat down, same curriculum committee sat down, and we went through every department and we said, make us your list. And then we looked over the list and we saw some commonalities, and we selected those commonalities, and then a few things that were really specific, but we knew were good, we selected those, and we sent that list to families. And we said, when you show up with your iPad, these are the apps that we will require you to have, but don't buy them until you have to. So if we have an app that's required for a chemistry class, and the kid doesn't take chemistry, don't buy it. Wait until they're in the chemistry class and they're required to do it. And then we told our teachers, you absolutely cannot require kids to download an app that is not on this list, including free ones. And that's really important. Because your teachers will say, but it's free, who cares? Yeah, it's free, who cares? Except that in all of their other classes, we've been telling them to use Notability. Because that's the one we want them to know how to use. We want every teacher to be able to say to a kid, okay, open this PDF up in Notability. I want you to read these paragraphs, make these changes, so on and so forth, and then email it to me. And because they do that in every class, everybody gets familiar with that process and we know how to do it. We don't lose any instruction time because everybody does it the same way. But then there's this other guy who says, no, I hate Notability. I like this other app way better, so I want you to use this one. But now we've got this struggle because I like that teacher better and I like his app better. So now I'm going to force my other teacher, who was struggling as it was, to get all this technology down, and now they feel bad because the kid's harassing them to use a different piece, a different app. It puts those teachers that were already borderline with their buy-in, that's the moment they throw their hands up. I can't ever win. I can't ever win. I finally figured out Notability, and now this guy's got me using this other thing. I just learned it. That's when that frustration level boils over, and it boils over for our kids too. Because look, gang, every time we say, oh, we'll just have the kids explain it to you because they're way smarter than we are. No, they're not. No, they're not. Our kids know nothing. They are as bad or worse than we've ever been. I leave the department where kids walk in every day and say, the internet's broken. Really? The whole thing? The whole internet's broken? Yeah, the whole internet's broken. The internet doesn't work. Oh, well, what's going on? Well, Google's fine, but YouTube doesn't work. Okay, tell me more about how the internet's working. Our kids don't. They really, really don't. They think they do, but they don't. So it's up to us. And those kids that get frustrated because they spend all day learning how to do these 9 things, and then they've got that 10th teacher that says, no, I want you to do this other thing this other way. It's not fair to them. So make a list of apps and hold people accountable to it. Now, you want to make a change in between years? Absolutely. But don't do it to the kids in the middle of the year. Don't allow your faculty to stray from that. Ebooks are very similar. Check out your ebooks first. We have this problem all the time. You know, with editions of textbooks, right? That's a big problem. That I want you to get a textbook and I tell you what it is, and you go on to Amazon and you find it used, except it's 2 editions older, and you show up in a class and it's really, it might as well be a different book. So you've got to be very specific with that too. Because ebooks, there's those free classics in the one app, and then your teacher wants a very specific version of Huckleberry Finn that's got the critiques in the back of the book, and the free version doesn't have those. So we've got to be very careful with that, make sure we're still picking up the same thing. Discipline, and what I mean by this is that I have a whole group of faculty members who are convinced that all discipline problems are because of the iPad. Apparently, before the iPad existed, there were no discipline problems ever. Students paid attention all the time. They were actively engaged in the boring lecture for 50 minutes all the time. Then we introduced an iPad, and now nobody's paying attention. No one listens to us. They've got their nose in their iPad, nobody cares. I will quote the director of technology from Cincinnati Country Day, who in the year 2000 said, you know, if AOL Instant Messenger is more engaging than your classroom, then maybe you should make your classroom more engaging. Because that was the big problem at Cincinnati Country Day School in 2000, was that they had a laptop program and all students wanted to do was aim each other. There are people in this room that have no idea what AOL Instant Messenger even is because it didn't exist in your life. It was Twitter before Twitter. Everybody had an AIM account, and they used to have little, on the bottom of TV shows, now we have the hashtag, where we used to have, remember, AOL usernames and stuff for there. Yeah. This problem is not new. My God, kids have not been paying attention in class since we started having classes. I can't
you know, teachers and I fight about this all the time because I'm sorry, but I don't buy it. I just don't. If you give them a reason to do something on their iPad, then that's what they'll do if you hold them accountable for that. If you don't give them anything to do and they have an iPad, they'll find something to do. We went to the point, and I only throw this out because you may think this is a good idea. In our classrooms now, every teacher at the beginning of the year is issued a laminated piece of paper. It's red on one side and it's green on the other. And when it's not time for an iPad, we come up here and we turn it to red. And then we lecture. And then it's time for the iPad, turn it green. So what the kids do is they put their iPad down and they stare at the ceiling. And then when it turns green, they immediately get on their iPad and do all the things they were thinking about when they weren't allowed to be on their iPad. I don't use the red or the green card because my textbook is on the iPad, the graphic calculator I require is on the iPad, Notability is on the iPad, Schoology is on the iPad, so when they're in my class, they have to use the iPad. And as I'm walking around the room in my flipped classroom and they're working on problem sets together, if they're not engaged in working on problems, I deal with the fact that they're not engaged. So I can tell stories of classroom visits I've done with teachers who railed against the iPad, and that was not at all the problem in the room at the time. They just don't see it that way. So you may have to have these discussions, and by may I mean will. Because teachers will tell you that the iPad ruined their classroom. And it's not the iPad's fault. It wouldn't matter what the device is, their classroom was already ruined. Nothing changed for us in terms of staffing. Sorry, if you were looking at growing your IT department, the iPad's not going to allow you to do it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I
No, go ahead.
about your discipline.
Yeah.
Did you sit your kids down and teach them any kind of like digital citizenship skills, or did you make them go through any kind of course like that?
So we've-
Like,
Yeah, we've always had that.
okay.
And that has always fallen to me at the beginning of every school year by class. Well, so new students, we do separately. New students I get in small groups called inbound groups. There's about 16 kids per group. And new students to Mercersburg, I read them the riot act. I go over everything. I tell all the horror stories of kids that have been dismissed and the time I got to meet the Secret Service and all the girl that went to the juvenile home. That wasn't at Mercersburg, but it still makes for a great story. So I tell them all that stuff when we talk about that. We have a lot of students who have a desire to play collegiate athletics. So I focus in on those folks, and I talk a lot about the big picture, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You standing there holding a red plastic Dixie cup will always appear to be nefarious, even if it's not. So we have those conversations, and then with returning students, I get them by class, so all the 9th graders, all the 10th graders, all the 11th graders, and I do a reminder session. In my class, I never address it again. In my math class, I just don't address it again. Other than to catch kids in the act of not participating in class and say, you're not participating in class, I need you to participate now. Other teachers seem to have a really hard time with that. And I can't, that's part of my brain, I guess I don't have, because I can't relate to them. I don't know what their problem is. And that's unfortunate, but.
How tight is your network on student access to social media, YouTube, things like that? Because our district is so that they can't access
Anything.
anything when they're connected to our wireless.
So, up until a year ago, Mercersburg's network was wide open to everything. In fact, part of my pre-school speech to the students was, our network is wide open, there's not a single filter on it. If it's out there, you'll find it. That doesn't mean you should, and that doesn't mean that if you do, I won't still catch you, because I will. So we used to have a policy of no filter, but monitor. And then I got tired because I knew that our bandwidth was being used, at least in some portion, for wholly inappropriate reasons. And so last year we turned on filters, but the only thing we filter is the worst, most degrading sort of stuff. So the porn filter. Which, by the way, if you ever get a chance to be at a place where there was no filtering and it involves teenage boys and then you turn it on, It's fantastic. The reactions are simply splendid. Yeah, so that's the only thing we block, which means everything else is available. So that's another great conversation to have at your school. We're not E-rate eligible, which means that we were never bound by any of that stuff. Most of your schools probably are E-rate eligible. You probably receive E-rate funds, which means there's a certain checklist you have to do. But I find that the checklist is not nearly as restrictive as some people's interpretation of it. YouTube, the keynote speaker mentioned Tumblr, and I just giggled because she said, well, Tumblr seems to be blocked everywhere. Yeah, because Tumblr is 98% porn. Of course it's blocked everywhere. Is there some good stuff on it? Yeah, there's some good stuff on it. But no joke, the hashtag was, at Mercersburg for about 2 weeks, the hashtag was, at least there's still Tumblr. Because I blocked everything else that was worth looking at for a teenage boy, but at least there was still Tumblr. And that's what they're, look, Tumblr's like Reddit. Yeah, occasionally you can find some good stuff, but most of it's just junk. YouTube is great, but YouTube is also that source of like the endless clicking. So they started out with a good link, but then that one led to a Stephen Colbert thing, and that one led to a Daniel Tosh thing, and then it just went downhill from there. So you've got to have that conversation. You've got to have that ability. Yesterday in the flipped classroom session, there was a great comment made about talking to your students about how to watch videos. And I think that's probably true. We've got to go back to the basics and really sit down with our kids and say, okay, I want you to watch this YouTube video, and this is what I want you to get out of it. The YouTube video is 7 minutes long, so this should take you no more than 15. If you're still sitting at your computer after 15 minutes on YouTube, you missed. You did something wrong. But that blocking part has got to be addressed. Absolutely. We're wide open. We're an Apple authorized repair facility, which is great. It costs you nothing, but the benefits of it are huge. You can pick up the phone and call Apple and say, this is the problem and this is what I need. And because you're an authorized repair facility, they say, okie doke. As opposed to not being a repair facility and you call up Apple and you get the level 1 technician who says, did you turn it off and turn it back on? Yes. Did you do this? Yes. Did you do yes? And an hour later you get to the same point that you would have gotten to if you had just become an off. All it takes is one person on your IT staff to take an online test. And once they get the certification, then the entire school or district is an Apple authorized repair facility. And if you take it a step further, you can actually get Apple to pay you for repairing other people's warranted stuff. I think we make all of about $37 a year doing this, but it's totally worth it. Repairing iPads, there's only one repair that's ever done, and that's to replace the screen. And if you go to ifixit.com, they walk you through the steps. It's not terribly difficult. I'm amazed at how many kids will walk around with shattered screens instead of just getting them fixed. A new screen is $40. It's not expensive. So that's the other thing. Back to that whole, should we get insurance? Repairing screens on iPads is not expensive. It's not worth the hassle. You can send it to a company called AG Repair, and they'll fix it and send it right back to you. And I think even with all of their technicians doing it, the cost is usually under $100. So our staffing didn't change. Because for us, the only thing the iPad replaced is the reason the kid came to us in the first place. So kids used to come to us with broken screens and broken hinges and keyboard pieces missing and all that sort of stuff. Now they come to us with broken screens. So we just changed the thing that we were fixing. So there was no hit on our IT staffing at all. Infrastructure, we were in a great place, honestly. Our fiber backbone is all single node, it's all 10 gig stuff. Our copper was all Cat 5 or Cat 6. Again, everything was running 1 gig to the port on the wall. We were in a great place, except for Wi-Fi. We were shocked The year before, we had great coverage. Nobody ever complained about Wi-Fi coverage on campus before we introduced iPads. And then all of a sudden, there were all these people that couldn't connect. The drag on the wireless connectivity was unbelievable. So we roughly doubled the number of access points we have. Now we're in a pretty good spot again. I still have to go back through the dorms and get into some of the really deep rooms that are off in corners. We didn't do a great job there. We still got to get back to some of those. But that was by far our one big hole. Yep.
All right, so we're in the process of Wonder One and we have the app stores where we're having the biggest problem because students that have iPads all day now are just downloading apps all day long. So what did you do? I mean, in the spring, we're going to get more cable and all, but right now we're kind of like, wow, it takes forever to download even productivity things. I mean, when school's over, it's open and they can do it, but
Mac OS X Server. So Mac OS X Server, when you download the newest operating system, and this has been true for a couple versions now, Server is already there. It's just a license key. So you pay for it. It's $30, I think, for a school. It's ridiculous. And you turn on one feature of OS X Server. It's the proxy to the Apple Store. And the reason you do this is because every time an iOS update comes out, everybody goes to get it and it kills your connection. With this proxy service that OS X Server offers, what it does is the first person who goes and gets the update downloads it locally to your OS X server. Then every person after that who needs that same update gets it from the server, which is on your network, and doesn't go out to the store. So when we did this, we saw our download times for iOS updates just slashed. So they went, from 16 hours down to 12 minutes. Because again, you're only downloading it locally. The App Store, it'll help, assuming somebody has already downloaded that. So it won't help with everything, but it's huge for your iOS and your regular OS updates. For all your security patches and all that sort of stuff, because the first person that gets it saves it locally, now it's cached, every person thereafter is going to get it locally. So that'll help. Internet connectivity at some of your schools, I said earlier, wasn't your problem. Okay, it may be your problem. We switched from a 100 meg pipe to a 500 meg pipe this year. But we have 435 students that live there, and we have 80 faculty that live there. So I have 510 users, even at 500 meg, and they're all connected. I mean, it's probably 80 or 90% connectivity. So I'm still not giving them great bandwidth to the internet, but it's good enough. They can stream Netflix, they can almost always stream Hulu. YouTube, I don't have any arguments with people about YouTube anymore. I've stopped having the arguments. I can't fix YouTube. YouTube can't fix YouTube, right? So I get it. I wish we could make YouTube better, but we can't. It's beyond our control.
What about when you update and some of the restrictions that you actually have on an iPad just disappears? Is there a fix for that?
No. We call that the magic of iOS, right? So what you're talking about is that you do an iOS update and it'll change parental controls,
Exactly.
It'll change your ringtone, it'll change your default background. I have yet to have anyone at Apple explain to me how they thought that was a good idea. And the other real problem, the bigger problem that we had this last time around was that the iOS update was so big that everybody had to essentially delete everything off their iPad, and then do the update, and then they could restore stuff. A few people figured out that if you did it through iTunes, so if you connected your device to iTunes, then it would download the update to your computer, and then it would transfer the update over, and it wouldn't care how much space you had on your device. But our students, please, they've never connected. The whole notion of connecting their mobile device to their laptop, why would you do that? It's only those of us who remember iPods when you had to do it. They never even thought to, oh, really? No. So that's another problem, but that's an iOS issue. Yeah.
Do you have any experience using Cloudway to manage the iPads and sending out the updates and
So there's a number of these products out there, the MDMs, mobile device managers. FileWave is one. AirWatch is another one, and IBM makes one, Blue something. Anyway, tons of them out there. I've used all of them, and every time I use one of them, I go, wow, this is really cool. If I managed other people's iPads, I would definitely use this. But we don't manage anybody's iPads. So with our faculty iPads, so we just gave everybody new iPads this year. So all of our teaching faculty got a new iPad Air this summer. And what happened was they came in with their old iPad 2, and we said, did you back it up? And they said, yes. And we said, are you sure you backed it up? And they said, yes. And we said, great. And we took the one out of the box and unwrapped it and handed it to them and said, when it comes on, it'll walk you through it. When it gets to the point of restore from backup, say yes, and you're on your way. And most of our faculty were just fine with that, and then the ones that weren't stand there in the office, and I have a wonderful woman who works with me, and she's like everybody's grandmother. She's so sweet and gentle, and she walks them step by step through the process, and then they're on their way. Students do whatever they want because it's their iPad. So we don't have to use any of those tools, but I will tell you, every school I've talked to, those tools are like LMSs. Pick one. You'll hate 3 features on it, you'll love 3 features on it. And you'll talk to somebody who uses a different one, and they'll brag about how much better it is, and you'll switch, and you'll find 3 more features you don't like and 3 more features that you love. So pick one and go with it. Whoever's selling the cheapest one that week, they all seem to be about the same. Yeah.
Did you purchase iPad things for your teachers? Like when they do the restore, when they back it up, do they back it to their?
Dependent completely on the teacher. So for us, we created an Apple iTunes account for every teacher, and it's FAC for faculty, and it's got a 2-digit number after that. And it goes to their Mercersburg email address. So you're a faculty member at Mercersburg, you've worked with us for a number of years, and you decide it's time for you to move on to greener pastures. You leave. We have your email account, which means we get onto Apple's store, we reset your FAC 14 password, we go into your Mercersburg email account that you've now vacated, and we now have that account. The person who replaces you then gets your faculty 14 Apple ID and all of the things that you purchased under it. So, if you inadvertently bought all of the YouTube albums, or well, no, they're all free, so if you bought the Beatles box set, and you were accidentally logged in as your faculty account, then the person who replaced you just got all the Beatles. And we did that because that was before Apple had figured out the whole volume license purchase thing, and how to take keys back, and all of that stuff. Initially, I can tell you the worst argument I've ever had with Apple was the fact that I bought software installed on an iPad, but because the user did it under their personal Apple ID, I no longer, as the institution, owned the software I bought. And it was FileMaker, the original FileMaker Go app, which cost $30 at the time. I was livid. $30? Are you kidding me? I want that back. This is not like one of those $1.99 apps. Now, of course, FileMaker Go is free, so we wasted $30. We should have just held out. So that's how we handled that whole backup thing. Because we just say to them, you've got your personal and you've got ours. And you've got a MacBook Pro that you could save to locally. If they go to their department head and say, I need more iCloud space, the department head says, sure, here's an iTunes gift card for whatever. Buy it. We buy a lot of iTunes gift cards. And we give them to users, but we also use the volume purchasing program quite a bit for actual apps. The problem with the volume purchasing program is it doesn't do in-app purchases. And that's a huge problem. Accessories, it says it all right there. Don't buy them. Don't buy accessories for people because you can't win, you'll never get it right. Nobody likes the case that you'll pick out for them. Nobody will like the sleeve that you pick out for them. Nobody will like the, whatever one you buy will be the wrong one, so don't buy it. I happen to love this case. This is the only case that has lasted more than 2 months for me. And this one is here, And the only reason I bought it was because I have a good friend who's the tech director at a school in the Northeast, and he loves the Surface. And this whole thing with the Surface is that you can flip it all around and do that stuff. And he railed on me for years because I had that loose keyboard, right? And he's like, oh, you're gonna carry around two things. And so then the other day I went, yeah, what now? Oh, you didn't see that coming, did you? Look at that, 360 degrees. It's incredibly heavy though. I mean, this weighs about the same as this now because it's got a great battery. I never have to charge it. But I love the fact that I finally got to the point where I have a keyboard that can disappear when I want it to, so I can sit and read like I like to read. Okay? I love it. I showed this to probably 50 teachers at Mercersburg. I found one that went out and bought it. All the rest, no, I gotta have one that's pretty. Or I don't like the keyboard all the time, I only want it sometime. And so I can't win, so I gave up trying. The only accessory that you have to buy is this one. They're really cheap. They cost $7, I believe. The reason you need to buy this is because Apple went back to giving these out. For a while, they didn't give these out with the iPads. They gave out that crappy little two-prong thing. But they went back to selling these, but they come with that little flippy crocodile one. So what happens is students take their, and they can get this far away from an outlet, which means I'll walk into my math classroom and I'll have all the kids around the edge of the room sitting like this. So if you buy a bunch of these at $7 each, now your kids can sit 6 whole feet, oh wait, 8 feet away from the wall. I'm not joking. These things are gold at Mercersburg. People will steal them from one another. They'll fight each other for them. When the iPhone 6 came out, Apple finally got smart though, and they now actually sell the extended 6-foot lightning cable. So now this is a viable option. But this thing, you can buy 3 of these for 1 of these.
Or buy them mono price.
These?
No.
Yeah, these. Yeah, Mono Price, by the way, is the greatest site ever for cheap stuff like this. But you can buy these directly from Apple. I believe they're $6.95. Or you can run around the IT office in the back from all of the old iBook and MacBook bricks that are no longer any good because they don't have the MagSafe connector, but they still have this, or a version of this, and steal these off. Okay? So these you can reuse forever. The bricks, they won't. The other accessory I love, and I saw somebody else had one of these, the Mophie. If you've not, I mean, there's lots of companies that make these now, but it's just a battery. And I find, I'm still amazed at, with the length of the battery life, how often kids don't have it charged because they use it all the time and they forget to plug it in. But carrying this with me, this will charge the iPad 1 full time. So I can charge this and then take this on the road with me, and then I don't have to worry about where the next outlet is going to be.
Is that called Mophie?
Mophie, M-O-P-H-I-E. But there are lots of external batteries out there. All right. So let's see. Apple TV, I said. There's Connects, ATV, I said them. Oh, Worth Avenue Group. That's the insurance folks. Worth Avenue Group. They will set up a site for you, which is really cool. Your school website will go right to Worth Avenue Group, and they have multiple plans where your school can get kickback for all the insurance policies that you sell. But families can do a whole group thing. So everybody in the family can insure every device under one policy with Worth Avenue, and it comes out way more cost effective than any other insurance policy I've seen. Having said that, I still don't think it's worth it. But you will have folks that demand it, and so they're the company to go with. Aerohive, Aruba, and Cisco are all Wi-Fi vendors who claim to have solution specifically for the Apple TV routing issue. I've talked to schools who use their product, and it works no better than no product. But you will hear those names, Aerohive, Aruba, and Cisco, because they have this Bonjour routing thing, but you should be able to do it in your firewall without their product as well. I did mention Campus Manager and Packet Fence, but these are two devices that every time a student comes to our network and they connect their device, this matches their device to them. So we know who it is on our network all the time, and if they're not registered, then they can't connect to anything. Those of you who have bandwidth issues out to the internet, two products out there, Packet Shaper, phenomenal and phenomenally priced. Net Equalizer, very good and far cheaper. These are the tools that actually shape your bandwidth to the internet, so you can give the App Store 90% of your bandwidth if you want, and reduce everything else to 10% on those days when you want people to get to the App Store. Or you can take YouTube and knock it down to almost nothing if you wanted to make YouTube accessible but not useful. And then Monoprice we just mentioned. Monoprice is the place to go for every gadget. Every cord, every connector. It's where we get our Connects. We got our Connects ATV Pros for the first time through Monoprice because they were selling them $10 cheaper than everybody else, so we ordered like 30 of them. And then I went back 6 months later and they weren't on Monoprice anymore, because that's kind of the problem with Monoprice, is that they do batches of stuff. But when they have something there, it's fabulous. And I think that's it. So, everything, go ahead.
The cell phone